Okay, got another spatial thinking topic for you. And now, as we're thinking about objects and geometry and figures, we're going to talk about congruence and what it means for things to be congruent. Now, we already talked about congruence a little bit. We said earlier that congruent is really just basically geometry's fancy version of the word equal. But I want to change that definition just a little bit. Congruent means equal, but a better word for congruent would be matching. Things that are matching are going to be equal, but watch what I mean by matching. Let's say we have some points, and let's say we make some rays, which make some angles, and let's say I wanted to tell you that angle ABC is congruent to angle DBC. I would be telling you that they're equal, but I would also be saying that these two angles basically match each other. Or we could be saying that they're the same, or that they're equal, or that they have the same measurement. Congruent is all of those things all wrapped up in one word. It's saying that two figures match each other, that they're the same, that they're duplicates of each other, and that they're equal in measurement. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. But angles aren't the only things that can be congruent in geometry. Lots of figures and shapes can be congruent. In fact, you can have two segments that are congruent. Actually, you could have more than two segments that are congruent. You could have a bunch of segments all congruent to each other. And hey, you know what? Even quadrilaterals can be congruent. Shapes can be congruent, as well as angles and segments. Basically, in geometry, anything that you can measure could have a congruent matching partner or pair. Okay, so you could have a pentagon congruent to another pentagon, or even an octagon congruent to another octagon. And a lot of times what we deal with in geometry is triangles, which are congruent to other triangles. Now notice that these two triangles are facing the opposite direction from each other. But wouldn't you say that they're mirror images of each other? Wouldn't you say that they match? If you folded this screen in half, wouldn't they overlap? Yeah, they're still congruent even though they're facing a different direction. And if we were to tell a statement that says that these two triangles are congruent, it would look something like this. Triangle LMN is congruent to triangle XYZ. So this is what's called a congruence statement. It's like an equation saying that one triangle is equal to the other, but what we're really saying is that that triangle matches the other triangle. They're congruent to each other. The thing that you need to know about congruence statements is the order of the letters really matters. Okay? So if we said that triangle LMN is congruent to the other triangle, we would have to follow that same order, X, Y, Z. You couldn't say LMN is congruent to YZX. But you could maybe say triangle MLN is congruent to triangle YXZ. Did you see how we followed the same pattern there? Yeah, as long as you get the order matching, just like the figures are matching, then your congruent statement is going to be perfect. Okay, what else could we say here? We could say that part of this triangle is congruent to part of this triangle. Oh, that should say LM, not LN. That's a typo. Sorry about that. Pretend like that says segment LM is congruent to segment XY, and then you would have a correct congruent statement. Okay, notice if you said LM, you wouldn't say YX, you would have to say XY, because you'd have to follow the same order that you used for the first one. Okay, let's try another one. NM, segment NM would be congruent to ZY, not YZ, ZY. Angles too. Find angle MNL and take a second. How would you find the matching angle and name it correctly? Well, angle MNL would be congruent to angle YZX. And you can even trace your finger on the screen and see that the pattern of the order of those letters matches both times. So, congruent statements, the order really matters. And that's really all we have to say about things being congruent. So, let's practice just a little bit. First practice problem. I want you to write a congruent statement about these two angles. I want you to tell me that that one angle is congruent to that other angle. Then, I want you to write a congruent statement about two segments. Which two segments? Tell me that that segment is congruent to that segment. And write it as a congruent statement with a congruent symbol in between them. Make sure you name your angles and your segments appropriately and properly, and we should be all set. That's all we have to say. Hope you learned about congruence today. See you next time.